Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Monty Sylvan, and I am the coordinator for the membership department here at AdvaMed. Today, we have a wonderful and insightful webinar aligned for you today in partnership with Lachman Consultants, entitled Preparing for the FDA's Quality Management System Regulation, QSMR, Rollout in 2026, Understanding the Changes, and Aligning with ISO 13485. Today, I want to give a couple of housekeeping. If you have any questions, we do encourage engagement. We would appreciate all your questions. Please direct them all to the Q&A section here on Zoom. Just for organizational purposes, any questions that are asked in the chat will be redirected to the Q&A unless it is something that has to do with external of the webinar's content. Today we have our two wonderful speakers, Deanna Anderson, Senior Director of Medical Compliance at Lachman Consultants, as well as David Day, Director of Compliance at Lachman Consultants. Deanna, I hand it over to you.
All right. And actually, I'm going to turn it over to David real quick. He'll be opening up for us.
Oh, sure. Thank you. So good morning, afternoon, and evening to everybody. Hope I've covered everybody's time zone. So as Monty said, my name is Dave Day, and I'm a Director of Compliance with Lachman Consultants. Briefly, who Lachman are: we are a medtech, pharma, and biologics consultancy company, and we're in business over 40 years. We're based in the US, and we're based here in Ireland, where I am, and we have teammates scattered around the globe. Our team is made up of very experienced industry experts, Deanna being one of them. It's ex-VPs, ex-directors from industry, and we have a lot of ex-regulators on board as well. So folks from the FDA, MHRA, and the HPRA in Ireland. My background: I've been working in medical devices industry for over 20 years, and I've held senior quality and regulatory positions, and I've also worked with one of the notified bodies as well. Now I work with our medtech and pharma clients, mainly in the US and Europe. And I'll hand it over to Deanna to introduce yourself there. Deanna, please.
Sure. Thank you, David. Again, my name is Deanna Anderson. I have been working in pharmaceutical, medical device, and combination products for over 25 years. Majority of my time in industry was in various quality positions, including site quality leadership, as well as I have a few years in manufacturing. I've been working for Lachman Consultants for over 2 years, helping pharmaceutical, medical device, and combination product clients with their quality, compliance, and regulatory needs. I'm going to turn it back over to you, David.
Sure. Our next slide up is just a legal kind of notice, which I'm not going to read out every word of it because it would make for a very long webinar. We might just move on to what our agenda is. So our agenda is we're going to look at the benefits of QMSR implementation, which there are many. We look at a brief history between the FDA and ISO. Some of the kind of key differences between QMSR and the original QSR. We look at the impacts, the important impacts for medical device manufacturers. We look at how to maintain the compliance, prepare for an inspection, and we'll have some guidance and some next steps. So the scope of the session, it's going to be a high-level discussion. It's really to get the conversation started for some of our colleagues out there in industry. The session is open to everybody. Everybody's welcome, but we will primarily focus this session on manufacturers who are in compliance with the current 21 CFR A20 and haven't really worked towards the ISO 13485 certification yet, or that standard yet. So, and this is where we see that the more significant impacts. Having said that, we will have a slide or two on the additions that will be retained by the FDA. So that applies to companies that have ISO certification and they want to gain market access to the US. So out to the right there, you can see a screen grab of the QMSR final rule. It's for the uninitiated, it's just a 30-page document. It's not a bad read. The QMSR will become effective on the 2nd of February 2026. QMSR will incorporate by reference ISO 13485, and that'll be the 2016 version. QSR will be replaced with QMSR. I think overall, like, we see this as a good thing because we have seen throughout our careers misalignment between QSR and ISO, which leads to increased compliance costs and delayed market entry. So let's say manufacturers looking to enter the US have been unable to fully leverage their ISO compliant QMS, while our US manufacturers looking to enter the EU have had to do double compliance to align their QS or compliant quality management system with 13485. Move on to benefits.
Yeah, so as we have seen with the review, we do see there's some benefits. The new quality management system regulation introduced by the FDA aligns with the regulation for medical device international standards, ISO 13485, the 2016 version. This harmonization replaces the previous quality system regulation and offers several benefits for manufacturers, regulators, and patients. First benefit that we see is the alignment with global standards, which will allow for streamlining compliance by aligning ISO 13485 manufacturers with the ability to use one quality system to meet both US and international regulatory requirements, thus reducing any redundancies of having those, the two systems. This will facilitate global market access easily. Additionally, this will help smaller firms as well be able to have the regulation, the QMSR, and help them to get into the market as well. We also see, as David has already mentioned, some improved efficiencies, such as this will simplify the audit and inspection with regulatory and certification audits, which can be synchronized since the QMS requirements are standardized across the jurisdictions, thus reducing administrative burden with manufacturers no longer needing to maintain separate documentation for the QSR and the ISO 13485 compliance. As a part of this, with enhanced quality practices, this will be promoting continuous improvement throughout robust quality management principles, which will focus on ensuring product safety and performance through better control over design, production, and post-market activities. And a huge benefit, and the FDA did mention this also in their final ruling, is that there is a cost savings. FDA is estimated that it will save money, about $532 million per annum with this alignment with other related regulatory programs. Also, this will reduce the need for separate certification and audits, can result in significant cost and time savings for manufacturers as well. Additionally, training cost in the will be lowered as well, because you can cover and align all one set of requirements and not having the two separate sets of requirements. The harmonized requirements should help smaller manufacturers seek to expand internationally. And lastly, improved post-market surveillance is what I have reviewed as a part of this. ISO 13485 focuses on post-market surveillance, ensuring more robust mechanisms for tracking product performance, identifying any trends, and implementing corrective actions. So these are just some of the benefits. There's going to be more that as we as it is implemented in each of your facilities, you'll see as well.
Okay, so just a very brief history between the FDA and ISO. So the original FDA CGMP requirements for medical devices were first introduced in 1978, but they were significantly revised in 1996. And also in 1996, ISO first published 13485. There were subsequent revisions in 2003 and 2016, which is where we are now. So the FDA have always been involved in some form in development of ISO standards. So there's one critical standard that we'll talk about a good bit today, is their contribution to the development of the risk management standard, ISO 14971. And we're going to hit that on a number of slides later on. The FDA are also a member of the International Medical Device Regulators Forum. This was, heavily involved in the development of MDSAP, and they would audit to 1345. So the kind of key takeaway here is that it's not brand new to the FDA. Like, they've always been aligned and involved in some shape or manner. Next, we'll just move on to just, again, I know this is going to be very high level for some folks who know this stuff really well, but we'll go through it anyway. So for companies to attain ISO 1345 certification, they will work with a notified body, and the notified body will come in and carry out an assessment of their quality management system. So, and let's say any company that is already ISO 1345 certified, they're going to be very familiar with the notified body assessments because probably because of their frequency. They usually have a surveillance audit every year. There's a CAB surveillance audit every year. You might have microbiology in another year. So they're certainly more comfortable with a notified body coming in to inspect them. Notified body audits will cover all aspects of the QMS, like from your complaints, your CAPA, your design control, and very notably, they'd always look at your management reviews, internal audits, and supplier audits. So the next slide, we're just going to go over some of the key differences between like an FDA inspection and a notified body audit. So the notified body serves an important role for a company. They perform the assessments to ISO 1345 and to the regulation MDR 2017-745. That's how they get a CE mark. They're generally very collaborative because there's a lot of involvement working with the scheme managers and the notified bodies when you're making changes. But they will issue non-conformances, during, an audit, could be major or minor, and they have got the powers that you could lose your ISO cert, or you could lose, your CE mark of your product, and then your loss of access to the EU. The FDA, you could be argued that they're a little bit less collaborative, but they are like a government regulator and they have certain enforcement powers. So a non-compliance can lead to serious legal consequences for a manufacturer. And we've listed some of those repercussions in the last sentence, which is, warning letters, seizures, injunctions, recalls, criminal prosecutions, civil penalties, and import alerts.
So now that David has gone through from a high level perspective some of the key differences between FDA inspection and notified body audits, here's just a comparison of FDA inspection and notified body audits, highlighting some key differences in purpose, approach, focus, and some potential outcomes. So from a purpose perspective, we all know FDA's inspection is to ensure compliance with US regulatory requirements, including the quality management system regulation, medical device reporting, and labeling regulations, whereas notified body audits assess conformity with the EU medical device regulation and in vitro diagnostic medical device regulation for CE marking, and certifies compliance with the ISO 1345 to grant market access in EU and other markets. From authority perspective, David had mentioned a little bit on this as well, is the FDA inspections are conducted by FDA investigators as representatives of the US government and enforced by federal laws, Food, Drug, and the Cosmetic Act. Whereas the notified body audit is performed by an independent EU designated organization such as TÜV or BSI and are regulated under the EU MDR, IVDR, but operate independently of direct government control. If we look at the scope for inspections, FDA inspections focus on compliance with FDA regulation, including QSMR, labeling, reporting, and product-specific requirements, which includes pre-market, your post-market, and follow-up or for-cause inspections because of a recall a company may have had or an adverse event that they've been made aware of. Whereas the notified body audit primarily assesses compliance with ISO 1345 and the EU MDR IVDR, focusing on the entire product life cycle, which includes design dossier reviews, technical document checks, and clinical evaluation requirements. The overall approach, from an FDA inspections are typically unannounced in the US. However, for international inspections, FDA typically does schedule these. And these inspections are for routine surveillance, pre-approval, or for-cause inspections, with investigators reviewing the design controls, CAPA processes, your production records, complaint handling, and adverse reporting, and are heavily enforcement driven, whereas the notified body is generally scheduled in advance and you are given an audit plan to understand what they're going to be looking at, and are conducted in a consultative manner, but includes detailed reviews of the quality management system implementation, the risk management, and product compliance for surveillance and recertification audits. The overall outcome of these can be different, but similar. FDA inspections result with an inspection report that you're provided. However, if there are deficiencies, FDA will provide you a Form 483 before they leave the inspection, listing out any observed deficiencies that they identified during the inspection. And then you would then go ahead and respond to that 483 within 15 days, business days. Now, depending upon your response and your corrective actions, these could lead to higher enforcement, such as warning letters, fines, import alerts, product seizures, or injunctions, whereas a notified body audit results with an issuance of an audit report followed by a certification. If you are given any nonconformities that have, been identified through the audit, you are required to put corrective actions with regards to fixing what they've identified as a deficiency, and failure to comply can lead to the certificate being suspended or withdrawal. Now, the frequency of these inspections, FDA usually comes every 2 to 3 years on a routine inspection for medical device class 2 and 3. Now, as I mentioned earlier, if they're seeing something from the complaints and adverse reporting, or any other alerts that they receive, they could come in and do a for-cause inspection. For notified body audits, those are annual audits with a recertification every 3 to 5 years. With regards to cost, FDA inspections, there is no direct fees. I mean, it's a government inspection that's coming in to ensure that the regulations are being met and you're following all of your procedures and policies, whereas the notified body is a paid service. Now that we talked a little bit about the inspections, we're going to talk a little bit about the differences that we are seeing with regards to the QMSR and the QSR. The quality management system regulation and the existing quality system regulation differ primarily because the quality system regulation aligns with the international standard ISO 13485, which again is FDA's effort to harmonize requirements with global quality management practices for medical devices. However, some of the key differences that I'm going to point out here with regards to alignment with international standards, as we know, the QMS aligns with ISO 13485, where the QSR are FDA-specific regulations developed independently of the international standards. We've talked already a little bit about risk management, but here we go again. The quality management system regulation emphasizes a risk-based approach throughout the quality management system, from design to your post-market activities, as well as fully integrates the risk management principles, aligning to, as David mentioned earlier, ISO 14971, risk management for medical devices. This change ensures an effective risk management system provide the framework for sound decision-making within your quality management system to provide assurance that the devices will be safe and effective, whereas your QSR includes risk-related provisions, but does not explicitly require that a comprehensive risk-based approach across all quality management systems. From a documentation perspective, the QSR is going to rely heavily on the ISO 13485 documentation framework, including the quality manual, risk management file, and more standardized formats, with a strong focus on documented procedures and records to demonstrate compliance, whereas the QSR requires detailed records as directed by the regulation itself. Post-market surveillance, QMSR emphasizes post-market surveillance and feedback systems in alignment with the EU MDR and the ISO 13485 requirements, and requires a systematic monitoring of the device performance and customer feedback for continual improvement, whereas the QSR, the post-market requirements, are addressed separately under 21 CFR 803, the medical device reporting, and other parts not integrated within the quality management system. Now, as for audits, FDA will not consider, this is a big, I know a lot of people will probably have questions with regards to this, but FDA will not consider or accept an ISO 13485 certificates, nor will their inspection result in issuance of a certificate of conformity to ISO 13485. This is due to other FDA medical device requirements that they need to ensure that companies are meeting the regulations, and these are the CFR 21 parts 803, which, as I had mentioned, is the medical device reporting, 806, which is medical device reports of corrections and removals, 821, which is medical device tracking requirements, and then 830, which is the unique device identification. Those need to be audited. So that's something that's not going to change with regards to it, but that is why FDA will not accept ISO 13485 certificates. FDA does intend to replace the current QSID inspection approach that will be consistent with the requirements of the QMSR. Currently, FDA is evaluating the MD-SAP audit approach and plans to develop an inspection process and train their inspectors to that. So they're still, working a lot of this through. I know that there's 14 months before the QMSR is fully implemented. Now we move to design controls for QMSR alignment with ISO 13485 requirements, but are harmonized to maintain FDA's critical design oversight with focus on risk management during the design phase, whereas QSR design control requirements are more prescriptive and include detailed specifications for procedures, reviews, and validation. Corrective and preventative actions for QMSR, they are addressed under ISO 13485 as a part of a broader quality management system, and they will emphasize the root cause analysis and risk-based prioritization, whereas the QSR defines CAPA requirements in a more specific terms under subpart J of the 820s, focusing heavily on the documentation and reporting.
Okay, so what the new QMSR will bring in relation to ISO 13485 and the original QSR 21 CFR 820. So with the harmonization, there are a couple of key differences on how the inspection will go. The FDA will now be able to inspect your internal audits, your supplier audits, and management review. And this is a big change. So when I was on the receiving end of like an FDA inspection, I just had to prove that those items were done. So let's say for internal audits, I'd have an annual report. I'd be able to show the agenda that the internal audits were complete. So now they'll be able to get in and actually see the content of those internal audits. So with the implementation of QMSR, this exception is no longer present. So it's a very important point that you need to keep an eye on when you're getting ready for the inspection. So continuing on from there, we've talked about risk management. So risk management is a big component of ISO 13485. Now, the FDA states that it does not include ISO 14971, but emphasizes elsewhere in the preamble that it incorporates risk management as outlined in 13485, which of course references 14971. And you have to remember that the FDA recognizes 14971 as a consensus standard. So it's not a mandate, but it considers compliance to 14971 as fulfilling the regulatory requirements for risk management. So some of the other changes are some key terms, and we won't go into all the terms that have changed, but the QMSRs remove some of the traditional terms such as device master record, design history file, and device history record in favor of the term medical device file, which comes directly from ISO 13485. And like, although the terms are changing, the record keeping requirements behind it remains largely the same. Moving on. There we
All
go.
right. So some of the, what's the impact to medical device manufacturers? And on this slide, we, kind of just high level positives and challenges with the implementation of the quality management system, which as stated throughout the webinar, aligns FDA's requirements with ISO 13485, which may significantly impact some medical device manufacturers, especially those that have not implemented ISO 13485 or they don't have an ISO certification. And then here are some of the key areas of impact with regards to global harmonization. First, from a positive point of view, manufacturers operating in both US and international markets will be able to streamline their quality management system to comply with a single standard, thus reducing duplicate efforts, particularly not having to maintain two separate systems. However, a challenge that will be for those manufacturers that are unfamiliar with ISO 13485. They will need to invest the time and the resources in understanding 13485 requirements, as well as implementing the QMSR, which is aligned to 13485. So updating their policies and their procedures and their processes to ensure that they're meeting those requirements. From a risk management perspective, and we've stressed risk management throughout this webinar, as a positive, it's going to encourage a proactive focus on risk management throughout the product lifecycle, from design to post-market activities, thus improving the product safety, quality, and compliance of the medical device for the patient. This may be a challenge for some manufacturers as they must now integrate risk management more comprehensively throughout their system, which may require significant updates to their processes, procedures, and then overall training of their personnel. The documentation requirements have a positive impact in that the ISO 13485 provides a clear framework for documentation, making it easier to demonstrate compliance during inspections. However, manufacturers will need to update their quality manuals, their risk management files, and other documentation to ensure that they're meeting the ISO 13485. From a supplier management, the positives here is that supplier controls will be better, ensure better oversight of components and materials, reducing potential quality issues. However, manufacturers must establish more robust supplier evaluation and monitoring processes. For those that, from with regards to 820s, everyone has their purchase control. So, you should already, have a nice supplier evaluation program in place, but this will help to just strengthen your, with going to QMSR, strengthen your supplier evaluation program. The requirements for post-market surveillance have been strengthened, which will improve the ability to detect and address issues leading to safer devices. However, for those manufacturers that do not already have strong post-market surveillance program, this will require them to improve the monitoring, reporting, and corrective actions by updating their processes and procedures. So those are just some of the impacts from both a positive and a challenges that I see facing some of our medical device manufacturers.
Okay, so Deanna has talked a little bit about some of where the FDA is going to retain some of the other acts and parts of 21 CF4. So we're just going to go down through these fairly briefly. So the first one we have is labeling and packaging. So the FDA have opted to retain 820.45 because they didn't believe ISO 1345 went far enough, specifically to address the inspection of labeling. So that's been opted to hold on to that. Next, we'll talk about UDI. So where QMSR requires a manufacturer to assign a UDI, the manufacturer must document the system to assign unique device identification to the medical device in accordance with the requirements to 21 CF4 Part 830, which is unique device identification, along with the clause from ISO 1345, the 7.5.8. Next bullet is traceability. So the FDA want to retain Part 821, which is medical device tracking and requirements, and also clause 7.5.9.1. The fourth bullet, we're talking about reporting to the regulatory authority. The manufacturer must notify the FDA of complaints that meet the reporting criteria of Part 803, which is medical device reporting, which is not changing. And that's along with the ISO clause of 8.2.3. And finally, advisory notices shall be handled in accordance with requirements of Part 806, which medical device report of corrections and removals, along with those applicable ISO clauses.
Okay, now that we have gone through, some of the changes and, done some comparisons, how does a medical device manufacturer maintain compliance while with the 820s while implementing the quality management system regulation? Well, this is going to require a dual approach to ensure that you're maintaining your ongoing regulatory adherence while transitioning to the new, the updated standard. To do this, manufacturers should continue with business as usual. You already are meeting your regulations, the quality system regulations in the 820s, but then, following your procedures, your internal audit schedules, because those are, the internal audit schedules are helpful because this is where you're self-identifying some deficiencies as a part of that, and that you've self-identified it and you correct it. And then as a part of your document controls, ensuring that your documents and records are maintained, organized, and traceable, including the DHF, DMRs, and device history records. But ultimately, it's really getting a head start on your all of these elements, but then your supplier management programs, because this is going to be more in depth with regards to supplier management, that you need to verify your supplier controls are robust and are following the requirements of your purchase controls. And then just looking at the 1345 elements with regards to supplier management. So to start to update and harmonize your risk management programs by aligning your processes with ISO 14971. For risk management, which is emphasized under the QMSR, and you've heard it through both, David and I during our presentation today. Integrate risk-based thinking into all aspects of your quality management system. For design and development controls, ensure design inputs, outputs, verification, and validation meet both your 21 CFR 820 and the QMS requirements. And start to update your procedures, your quality manuals, your training materials to reflect the QMSR requirements while maintaining your current compliance standards. And also, I think it's beneficial to do training, and as a part of that training, provide your staff with awareness and provide differences between the QSR and the QMSR, and so that they can see the difference and how to adapt to these new requirements. Now that we've talked a little bit about, preparing, the next is, preparing for the inspection, addressing the QMSR implementation during the inspection by being transparent and upfront with the inspector about your transition to QMSR. Explain that your current system complies with the QSR requirements, and that, as I had mentioned with your internal audit, that will just, emphasize that, as well as ensuring, you're doing, when issues are identified, investigations and putting corrective actions into place to mitigate those. And then be prepared to share your quality management system implementation plan. David's going to go that in a little bit, but I mean, that's something that you need to be proactive to do. And this would include timelines, milestones, and the overall progress, because you have, 14 months remaining.
Okay, so some very broad high-level steps, for medical device and combination product manufacturers as well. We'll include those there. So the first bullet, review the QMSR final rule and read and understand ISO 13485 2016. There's also a practical guide that you can purchase as well on ISO 13485, which is it's a very in-depth guidance document, and it's definitely worth having. There's also a few folks have asked me about, do you have to buy ISO 13485? Well, you obviously can buy the standard, but you can view it on the ANSI website. So it's the American National Standards Institute. And there's actually a link built into the QMSR final rule. And I believe it's page 7500. So page 4 of the PDF, there's a link and you'll be able to view 13485, but it's a read-only one. So I would recommend you buy the standard so you have a PDF and you can use it a bit more easier. The second bullet would be a gap assessment. So if a manufacturer are not ISO 13485 compliant or the QMS isn't, a more thorough and comprehensive gap analysis will be required. If a company already complies with ISO 13485, familiarizing with the additional sections of QMSR that go beyond ISO 13485 would be advisable. The third bullet is to select a team, develop a team, and train the team. So Deanna's mentioned risk management, ISO 13485, and the QMSR course. So you're getting the right people involved in the transition project, and then obviously developing them, because a lot of this is brand new. Some things haven't been established yet or communicated from the FDA yet. So it's going to be a process that kind of evolves as we go along. The fourth bullet, the most important bullet, is to develop an implementation plan. Like any project, you have to put a plan together. The preparation is key to a smooth transition. And the final obvious one is to get started today, or ASAP. We've a little over 14 months to get our quality management systems updated. It's possible, depending on the size of your organization, but as you know, it takes time to get anything like this done. So.
And if I could just interrupt here as well, I'm sorry, David, but
Sure.
you talked about your transition team. One of the other piece is to make sure that you have a senior leadership support or a sponsor, because if you're going to need additional resources, having them be a part of it and have that visibility of the gaps that you may identify or your needs as you're implementing. I think that'd be another element to consider as a part of that transition team.
Yep, that makes sense. So just in conclusion, QMSR, in our view, aims to streamline the regulatory requirements, and I think it's doing a good job of that. So it's aligning the US regulations more closely with the ISO standards, or the international standards. And we believe this alignment will enable smoother market access for medical device manufacture, which in turn leads to efficient patient access to critical medical devices. So we don't doubt harmonization is going to have its challenges, as we all have updated our quality management systems over the years, but it's worthwhile. It's going to open up other opportunities for manufacturers to expand into other markets. So I think it's a very positive move. The second point, it's just worth mentioning that QMSR also modifies 21 CFR Part 4. So this is concerning combination products. So by updating references from QSR to the relevant clauses of ISO 13485. So we hope to do another webinar on combination products. We kind of have had a few messages from different clients. I think just my key takeaway would be just get started on your gap assessment as soon as you can, and start building your team and updating your QMS. Do you have anything to add there, Deanna, on that?
No, I think you've covered it very well. So the one thing I just want to share with you is on this presentation, you can see that we've included David and my contact information if you want to reach out for any assistance or support, or you just have a question, please feel free to reach out to us. And then with that,